After you've been a software engineer for some time, you start to pick up on certain patterns. One important theme I've noticed so far is that not all software engineering roles are created equal. They're seen differently within the same company and in the industry as a whole. Some roles just carry more weight and set you up for the future better than others. The type of role you're in and the work you do affect what opportunities come your way. It also shapes what employers think you're capable of doing. Whether that's fair or not, it's the reality we're working in, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. The thing that explains why some software engineers land new roles within weeks, while others with the same or even more years of experience struggle to get a callback from a recruiter. Let's get into it. When I got into software development, landing a job as a software engineer was pretty straightforward. All you needed to do was to know a few programming languages, have some projects to show, and you're good to go. Now, all of this was pre-2022 before the market shifted and all the layoffs started happening. All of this can still be true if you're very early on in your career. When you're entry level, knowing what to do and how to build things is typically enough to land you a job. Well, maybe not so much today with how competitive things are. The bar has gotten much higher, but that's a conversation for a different day. Here's where things start to change. Once you cross that 3, 4, 5-year mark and you're at the mid-level moving towards senior and above roles, what matters more and what the industry cares about isn't only the programming stack you know. It's the problem space you're working in. Companies can find people who can read and write code in whatever language they use. That's the simple part. AI coding tools can now do that better than any software engineer can. When they're hiring for non-entry level positions, we're talking mid-level and higher, you're looking at candidates on 2 levels. First, and their preferred preference is someone who understands the specific domain they're hiring for. Someone with direct experience in that exact space. It's not just that they want you to have experience. They want you to have experience that is directly related to the team or the domain they're hiring you for. For example, they might need someone who has worked with data pipelines or built data platforms. Or maybe they're hiring for someone with expertise in authentication systems. They're typically looking for specialists, not generalists. Now, the second tier of candidates they look for is people who have solved problems at a similar level of complexity or higher than what the role requires. So even if you don't have direct domain experience, you might still make the cut if you can demonstrate that you've tackled problems at a similar difficulty level. The signals they use to measure show up in how you approach and answer specific questions during your technical interviews. Your problem-solving technique, for lack of a better way to put it. If you've worked in environments where you had to write design documents, do deep analysis, share them with other collaborators, work cross-functionally, and go through design reviews, all of those skills show up in the way you think and how you communicate. That's actually why engineers can move pretty easily between companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, and some teams within Microsoft. Depending on the team, the problems they've solved and the impact they can talk about are similar enough that these companies recognize the value of the work. So why do companies look for candidates based on these 2 criteria? Well, their reasoning is pretty simple. When you think about it from the business side of things, companies are typically trying to get value from their employees as quickly as possible. If they're hiring you at a non-entry level position, they expect you to ramp up fast. They want you shipping code and ideally making impact as soon as possible. And it'll be much easier for you to make that impact if you're used to the work, if you're used to the problem space, or have solved problems at a similar difficulty level. The process of writing and shipping code is pretty standard across companies. You have your IDE where you write the code. Your build process goes through GitHub Actions, Jenkins, Azure DevOps, or whatever CI/CD system, and deployments go through pipelines that end up on AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. The tools might be different, but the flow is pretty much the same. Companies can teach you their specific tools. What they don't want to teach you is the context, the why behind the code, the domain knowledge that takes months or even years to build up. That's what they're hiring and paying you for, your expertise in the domain. So what does this mean for you and the typical software engineering career? Well, before you get your first job, you're somewhat of a generalist. You know how to code and you know a little about a lot of things. The breadth is there, but there's not much depth. Then you land your first job and you start writing code in whatever space your team works in. It doesn't really matter what domain it is at that point. All that matters is that you have a job that's paying your salary. Now, as time goes on, whether you like it or not, whatever you're spending your time doing is what you're indirectly specializing in. The space you're in becomes your expertise. It's what your experience is tied to because it'll be what you know how to do on paper. For the majority of us, we didn't actually choose that space. It was handed to us. It was just the way in, the opportunity that was available. Now, that's fine initially, but the thing is, you don't want to stay in that space for too long to the point where it becomes your entire identity. That's where things can get tricky. Here's a rubric for how I think about this. It's pretty broad and generalized, but let's say you're the mid-sized tech company. There will be several verticals like finance, legal, supply chain, product and engineering, HR, sales operation, and so on and so forth. Now, you could find software engineering roles in all of these places, but here's the reality and the truth. You typically want to be in product and engineering, and I'll tell you why. That's where the most visible impact happens. The work there literally tells its own story. Compare that to building software for the finance team, for example. You're building tools that maybe 50 or 100 people will use internally. Yes, someone has to build it, but try creating a compelling narrative around building a performance review dashboard. It's tough. The work there tends to be pretty straightforward. CRUD operations. Create, read, update, and delete. It's typically not challenging, and there aren't enough complex problems to solve in that space, talk less of the scale. Now, within product and engineering, there is a whole world of possibilities. You've got front-end customer-facing teams building the actual products that users interact with. Then there are back-end teams handling business logic and data processing. Infrastructure teams managing the system that everything runs on. Cloud platforms, developer infrastructure and tooling teams, security, data platforms, machine learning, the list goes on. These teams are typically organized differently depending on your company and what the product is, but here's what matters. As long as you're doing work with measurable impact that's tied to the product and those skills can transfer elsewhere, then you'll be building valuable experience. Think about it. Cloud and infrastructure. Every company runs on the cloud. The problems you solve around scaling the systems, managing cost, ensuring reliability, those skills translate everywhere. Back-end services handling hundreds or millions of requests. That experience matters whether you're at a fintech company, a streaming platform, or an e-commerce site. The scale might differ, but the fundamental challenges are similar. The key is that you want the problems you're solving to be complex enough to be interesting and common enough to be valuable at other companies. You typically want to be working on things that make you think, yeah, other companies definitely deal with this as well. You want to make sure the narrative you can create from the work is compelling enough to show that you can create value. Now, you might be thinking, Uma, do these jobs even exist, or are you just talking about jobs that nobody can get? They absolutely do exist, even within your own company right now. You can tell which teams are working on the most critical systems. You know which teams are directly responsible for keeping the lights on or driving the core business forward. You can probably guess which teams they're not touching during a layoff. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a not so glamorous side to these. These roles typically come with trade-offs. You'll probably be on call. There's definitely more stress and more visibility. Your work will get scrutinized way more because it matters more. But here's what you get in return. The learning and the growth and the narrative you gain from experiences like that is what builds a career that can take you anywhere. When layoffs happen, when the economy shifts, the people who have been working in those spaces tend to land on their feet way faster. Even before layoffs, those are the people that recruiters headhunt and send DMs to because their work matters. So how do you actually get there? How do you position yourself to move into these roles? I'll tell you this based on my experience and people who have coached. The best time to do this is when you actually have a job because you have leverage. You can be selective about what you move into. You're not desperate enough to take the first offer that comes your way. That's exactly how I made my move. I went from working on an internal services team to joining the team building core infrastructure for Office 365. That role and that experience is what eventually positioned me to get into Netflix. If you want to hear about that story, I'll link the full video up here. But I want you to know that it's absolutely possible and it's what you should be aiming for if you want a sustainable career moving forward. Now, if you need guidance navigating situations like this, if you want help figuring out how to identify these opportunities and position yourself for them, consider joining the Code Room. It's my community for software engineers where we focus on 3 pillars: technical growth, technical interviewing, and career advancement. There are multiple live weekly sessions where we dig into exactly this kind of stuff and I coach you through how to navigate them. Join me and other software engineers who are thinking strategically about their careers. That's it for this one. I also have tons of other topics like this, so let me know if this resonates and I'll share more of them. All of this is related to my experience and what I've observed, but I'll genuinely love to hear your thoughts and your experiences too. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.